Amen and amen. We serve an amazing God, amen? And he does amazing things, amen? And he does them through some pretty amazing people, amen? And this church is full of amazing people, just like the ladies that were featured on that bumper video. And speaking of amazing people, I have a gift for you tonight. I'm not gonna be preaching, but an amazing pastor preacher is. One of the great honors of my life is getting to be your pastor. Have you ever considered that your pastor needs a pastor? And there's a friend of mine, a big brother of mine, a brother of mine that has like been my pastor. And we're gonna walk through Paul's command to us really to be anxious for nothing, but by prayer and supplication to make all your requests known to God, and the peace of God which transcends all understanding will guard your heart and minds in Christ Jesus. And so I don't know if you have somebody to call when the anxiety levels begin to rise up in you. I hope you do. If you don't, you're not doing it right. If you don't, you should join a disciple group like the 900th time I've told you, okay? But when I have those kind of things, one of the people that I call is who's going to preach tonight. The book of Philippians is about finding joy no matter the circumstances, and this brother knows a bit about this. Not only is he an amazing friend and an amazing pastor, he is an amazing preacher of the Word of God. Church of 1122, would you stand to your feet and please welcome Pastor Bruce Frank.
Thank you, man. Thanks. You guys, good to see you. Hey, 1122, great to be back. If I hadn't met you before on the previous couple of times, I'd love to meet you after the service, but let me start off with a couple of introductory things. First of all, thank you for the church that you are. Thank you for the way that you love your pastor. Pastor Joby and I met maybe 7 or 8 years ago about this time of year. We were providentially put together at a Tim Tebow golf tournament, and we, over 18 holes, actually talked about how do you plant churches and sponsor kids with Compassion International. And I know Joby and you guys were already well into that, 4 or 5 years, I guess, at that point. I think the only church doing that at that point, planting churches and sponsoring kids. And over 18 holes, both Pastor Joby as well as Lars, they put the full court press on me, and by the time I got back to Asheville, I was like, we are doing that. And so I want to thank you for that. And there's also about 4,600 children that have been sponsored from up in the hills of Western North Carolina that say thank you as well. And anyway, Joby and Gretchen, I can think of very few people that I don't have more love and respect for by the way he handles his business, the fact that he stays humble and hungry, and that translates over into your church as well. So, keep pursuing the Lord, keep going after that. Again, Joby and Gretchen, Pastor Ryan, we've been ministered to, my teams have been ministered to over at the retreat center, and the culture of hospitality and the culture of really just gospel hospitality really is throughout your church. Again, from the retreat center, from your production staff, just the whole thing. So thank you for being that kind of church. We've learned a lot. We've learned a lot from y'all as well. I joked the last time, I think during Saturated I was here, is a year or two ago when I was here, I saw the prayer benches. I'm like, man, we got to take that back. We got to take the prayer benches back. So we made prayer benches for all the camp. We got 7 campuses. I'm like, we got to make prayer benches for everybody. So we made prayer benches. Took about a month, get them all done. And the first time I used the prayer benches, my people didn't know how to use them. I was like, we don't have many Episcopals or something, because this is a true story. They actually came down here, and instead of kneeling on the prayer benches, they knelt on the floor and put their elbows on the bench. They're like, we're doing this wrong. We got to have a better way. So we've learned how to do it now. Thanks for sharing all your great ideas for that. So Philippians chapter 4 is where we're going to be. And by the way, the text we're going to look at today there's actually three verses in Philippians 4 that are in the top 10 verses that are downloaded. As a matter of fact, the 2 of the verses we're going to look at today, one of them was the most downloaded verse on the YouVersion of any verse in the entire Bible in the year 2021 and 2022. Imagine that. And it would be awesome if if we just took part of the verse. If just part of the verse said, if we just took the part that said, be anxious. Man, we're killing that, aren't we? I mean, if that's all it is, if we just took the part that said, be anxious, I mean, we are awesome, because if you don't know this, we're anxious people. We are anxious people, and the signs are everywhere. And not just the fact that we've got 255 million prescriptions for anti-anxiety medicine. We only got 333 million in the whole country, so somebody in here is double dipping. I'm just saying that, but you've got that, but the stuff we are worried about runs the gamut. I mean, from money, am I gonna have enough money to retire? Am I gonna have enough money to buy a home? People worry about, am I gonna be alone? They worry about, I gotta go to the doctor. Can I find the right spouse? What about being able to have children? What if I already have children? What about losing a child? What about interest rates? What about the economy? Ukraine, COVID, et cetera, et cetera. It's like we worry. It's just that anxiety just weighs us down. And before we jump into the text, here's what I want you to think about. 200 years ago or so, when there was actually a time in our country when we only had 3 channels on the television. Like right now, you've got everything from Amazon to Hulu to everything. But many years ago, there were just 3 channels. 3, channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, 3. That's all there was. Think about it like this. When it comes to the subject today, channel 1 is like your past. All right, channel 1 is your past. All that's on channel 1 are reruns, it's black and white. It's usually stuff that's just like, you know what, I want to put the past behind me. You guys hear the gospel all the time. Romans 8:1 is one of your favorite verses, and you understand that, you know what, if I'm in Christ, that there's no condemnation for me. So your past, there might be some regret there, but there's really not any anxiety there because you can't do anything about it. That is your past. Channel 2 is your present. It's like where you are right now. That's where God wants you to live. Right here in the present, being on mission with God, loving your family, loving others, all that. That's channel 2. That's a good channel to be on. But channel 3, if channel 1 is your past and channel 2 is your present, then channel 3 is your future. That's what we worry about. That's what keeps us up at night. That's the stuff that has all the scary programming on it, and that's the part that, because you're not worried about you're not anxious about the past, and you're not really anxious about the present because you're in it. What we get anxious over, generally speaking, is the future. Sometimes when you hear anxiety, you think it's kind of just a sidebar issue, but there's a 5th century theologian by the name of Augustine, and he said that our emotions, and when you think about emotions, these emotions like fear, the emotion of worry, anxiety, those are all siblings together. But when you hear that, Augustine said that our emotions are like smoke from a fire. The smoke is showing that there is something deeper on the inside. And what his parallel is that our emotions are more than just emotions. They are actually showing something much, much deeper. Like if you had your fire alarm go off in your house and that incessant beeping that just gets louder and louder and louder, it is not a good idea to take a hammer and just beat that thing off the wall. It's not a great idea to ignore it. It's not a great idea to say, I'm just gonna get used to that. But at some point, I'll just get used to that beeping. It's not, because what it's trying to tell you is that there is a fire somewhere in your house, and if you don't take some action, and if you don't take the necessary action, that will burn your house down. And so when we look at this tonight, I don't want you to just think, everybody worries. I want to show you that this is a much, much deeper problem. And what my goal for you, and by the time you walk out of church today, is to be able to say, you know what, how do I take the ulcers and the insomnia and the Prozac and get to peace of mind? How do I get to peace of mind? How do I get to the calm assurance that whatever God is doing in your life is best? How do I get there? How do I get to John 14 that says, peace I leave with you. My peace I leave with you. Not as the world gives, but my peace I leave with you. Do not let your heart be troubled and do not let it be fearful. How do I get to that place? So that's what Philippians 4 is about. And by the way, I was feeling pretty Baptist-y this week, so there's actually 3 points and they all start with the letter R. I tried to avoid it, so, Baptists in here, you'll be comfortable. Here's where it is. 3 things, and it just kind of lays it out right there. We're going to go walk through the text and just do Bible preaching in Philippians chapter 4, starting in verse 2. The first one is this, and you could almost spend the whole time on this. They're all related to how do I got to get to some peace of mind. The first one is resolve conflict. Verse 2 says, I entreat Euodia and I entreat Syntyche to agree in the Lord. Those are 2 ladies in the church. Those are 2 feminine names. Those are 2 ladies, probably leaders in the church. Yes, I ask you also, true companion. True companion is, some commentators think it's actually a formal name. I think it's like Sisychus or something. Somebody says it's a formal name. Probably an elder or a pastor in the church. We don't know. There's a few guesses. Help these women who have labored side by side with me in the gospel, together with Clement, we don't know anything else about Clement, and the rest of my fellow workers whose names are in the book of life. So here's what it is about resolving conflict. Because you understand, when God does a vertical work in your life, it affects not just the vertical, but it affects the horizontal. And so what you see in this text is you've got two lady leaders, two leaders in the church who are in conflict, and Paul calls it out. Now understand, in that day and time when you got a letter from an apostle, the church would come together, he would undo the scroll, and they would be sitting right there. And he's calling out names, and it's like, hey, you and you guys got to agree in the Lord. And as a matter of fact, he looks over and he's like, Sisychus, why don't you get over and you get in the middle of this and you help these ladies. Now, a couple of questions. Woman, what are they fighting about? We don't know. We can pretty assured that it wasn't some major doctrinal issue, because the Apostle Paul has never had an issue calling things out, being very specific. Just see the book of Galatians. He never has a hard time saying, this doctrine is wrong, get your stuff together. So it's not anything major, and these are not baby Christians. They've labored side by side in the gospel. These are the people that were D group leaders. These are the people that helped at beach baptism. These are the people that were like sponsors of Compassion Kids. That's who these people were. But somehow the minor stuff had become major stuff, because you got two leaders who dug in their heels, words got said, feelings got hurt, tempers got flared, and there was a stalemate, and he is calling this out. So verse 4 and 5 actually tells you, he exhorts it more. Verse 4 and 5 say, rejoice in the Lord always. I think that's connected to what he's saying right before this. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. And that's where verse 5 comes in. Let your reasonableness, we'll come back to that. Some of your translations say gentleness. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. Why should I do that? Because the Lord is at hand. So I want you to notice something. Verse 2, he says, agree in the Lord. It's not that you're going to have total agreement. It's the idea of your mindset. Get the big picture. Verse 3 says your names are in the book of life. In other words, you're on the same team. Sometime when my wife and I might be having a little bit of conflict, one of us will simply say, same team, same team. In other words, we're on the same team. Let's not attack each other. Let's attack the problem. All right, so you're on the same team. In the same way with the church, it's like, hey, we're on the same team. And then verse 4 says you rejoice. How do you rejoice? You rejoice in the Lord. Now, I know the whole thing, the whole book of Philippians, I can't remember how many times, I think it's 19 times joy or rejoicing is used. And basically what that is, it's a God-given delight. It is in the person of God, but it's also in the people of God. It is in the person of God. It's a supernatural delight God gives you. And there is a huge desert of joy in the church today. Just walking around. I remember as an unbeliever when I was like 15 or 16 going into churches, and I'm like, dude, these are some sad people. They are so sad. Now granted, it was at a First Baptist church, and most of the First Baptist churches are sad, but I'm just telling you, I'm saying that they were sad, and it was a stumbling block to me, because I'm like, why do I want what they have? And so the vertical goes and God gives you joy, but understand your horizontal relationships affect your joy. Your horizontal relationships affect your joy, it affects your testimony, and it affects your church. Your relationship with Jesus is personal. You had to personally repent and believe the gospel. You had to do that personally. Your grandmom couldn't do it, your brother couldn't do it. You had to personally do that. So when people talk about a personal relationship with Jesus, they are accurate. As long as you don't think that your personal relationship with Jesus is a private relationship with Jesus. God raises up a family, and then he puts you into that family, and that family has got people that are in the sanctification process just like you. You got some crazy people, you got some people that, and here's the deal, you gotta understand everybody checks the sanctification boxes off in different order. Some of you check it off like, hey, I immediately stopped cussing and stopped doing drugs or whatever. Somebody else is still struggling with that, but maybe they're a much better husband than you. Just understand, you check it off in different order. And so what happens is God builds a family of faith and you unite around the gospel. And here's what I mean by that. In this room, on the campuses, there is a wide variety of backgrounds. You got PhDs and you got GEDs. All right, you've got people that are white collar, you got blue collar. All right, you've got Asian, African American, white, and probably about another 5 or 6 different ethnicities. You've got all of that in here, but none of those things are the primary thing that brings you together. What brings you together and what you unite around is you unite around the gospel. If you were to go to any of the campuses up, come visit us sometime in Western North Carolina, all right? Do so in the summer, just like we come down here in the winter, all right? The idea is, if you go to any of the campuses, one of our values, we've got about 8 staff values, and one of them is we unite, not staff values, church values, we unite around the gospel. We don't unite around politics. We've got differing views on whether it be politics or immigration or you name it, and it's different, but those are all subservient to the unity that we have in the gospel. So the big picture, he's saying this: you're gonna spend eternity together. So make sure you keep your eye, listen, heaven is real, hell is real. Make sure you don't get sidetracked with this peripheral issue. Make sure you don't get sidetracked with stuff that 1,000 years from now is not gonna matter at all. And so, Jesus said the way that you and I love each other is gonna be the way people know if you're a disciple of Jesus. Think about it. I know some of you pagans probably love that Yellowstone show. And I'm just gonna say, I've heard that there's like a brand. They brand them. They don't just brand the cattle, they brand the people at the Yellowstone Ranch. And when they brand them, they're like, you belong to a family. And that family, we might bicker, we might squabble, but bottom line is you have the other person's back. And we unite around the gospel. I don't think Costner or Beth do, but I'm just telling you, that's what you do. You unite around the gospel. And here's what I would just take the Philippian church, for example, to show you how diverse it is. The Philippian church got founded in Acts 16, and in Acts 16, you see a wide background. You got a CEO businesswoman, kind of fashionista by the name of Lydia. She responds to the gospel and she gets saved. There's a slave girl that's been being kind of pimped out a little bit, and every indication is she also gets saved. And then you got a jailer who's probably an ex-military guy, like a Navy SEAL type person, rough and tough, and he's in his retirement job. And those are like the founding members of the church of the letter you're studying right now. You can't get any more diverse, but they're like, we unite around the gospel. That's why he says, let your reasonableness be known. What's that mean? Well, reasonableness, the opposite would be unreasonableness. All right, I spent a long time on that. All right, so the idea, it's unreasonableness. It means flying off the handle. It means you are gracious. It means you don't overreact. All right, true confessions. A lot of Floridians, you all come up to the mountains in Western North Carolina, and I would say this, you all have awesome roads here. We do not up in the mountains. We have no shoulder. We were like breathing in the air of asphalt, like this is amazing. Look at these shoulders, look at all the room. But when you all go up to the mountains, you all get nervous and twitchy and you drive really slow. And so what happened is, true story, this is a true story, it's embarrassing, but this is what happened to show you that it's hard to show your reasonableness and people are watching. So I'm driving on I think it's a 65 mile an hour, let's just say 55, all right? This lady with a Florida license plate was going 35, I promise. And there's no shoulder, all right? There's no shoulder on our roads at all. And so I'm going there and I'm in a hurry and I'm not trying to be rude, but my truck is a little bit high and it has those big lights and I was like kind of on, I was like, come on, and then finally it goes to a 2, and I could tell she was kind of getting nervous and I was feeling bad a little bit, but I really wanted her to speed up. So I finally get another lane and I'm going by her and that engine kicks in, and right as I'm going by her, I remember right in the middle of my window is Biltmore Church sticker. And I was like, and so you'd be proud of me though. Immediately, the Lord put it on my heart to push that button that makes that window go over like that where she could not see it. And so I was like, and I didn't want to shame the Lord, but and so it's not that easy to be reasonable and to not overreact. And so here's something that's been there for a long time. On the major stuff, listen, take action. There is some major stuff There's some doctrinal stuff. There's major stuff that their action is necessary. Clear right and wrong, major on the, like we gotta stop this. This is a moral issue. This is a major, you take action on that. But on the minor stuff, there has to be a sense of the big picture. And there is minor stuff, preferences. Nothing wrong with having preferences. I mean, you have them, Joby has them, everybody has them. Just don't elevate your preferences up to a biblical conviction, because they're just your preferences, all right? What kind of music you like, what kind of attire, how warm it is, all of that stuff, those are preferences. And you're like, well, I got the right to have preferences. You do have the right to have preferences. But when you came to faith in Jesus, you followed somebody who laid down his rights, Philippians chapter 2, and died on a cross for you. So then you and I, when we follow him, we lay down our rights for the gospel's sake. Here's the deal. Your Christian liberty ends where evangelism begins. So you're thinking, okay, if it's gonna make the gospel look bad, then I lay that liberty down. That ends right there. And so the idea of, if it's a minor issue, just, hey, laying it down. And by the way, in all things, you and I show love. So what do? What can you do? You can, let me ask you this. What have you done? What relationships have not been resolved? You're like, well, Bruce, I can't resolve all the conflict. That's correct, you cannot. But have you done what you can do? Hebrews chapter 12, Romans chapter 12, one of them says, strive to be at peace with all people. Romans chapter 12, toward the end, it says, as far as it is with you, be at peace with all men. So is that the case? Right now, is there a relationship that is fractured that you haven't even attempted to make right? Paul tells husbands, if you don't treat your wife a certain way, he actually says in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7, he says, husbands, live with your wife in an understanding way and grant them honor as a fellow heir of the precious grace of life, so that your prayers will not be hindered. In other words, if you and I if the horizontal relationship with our wife is not good and we argued and we're not honoring her, then get up off your knees, because your prayers aren't going anywhere. And so what I'm asking you is there any relationship with a person, any conflict you've chosen not to resolve? Jesus actually says, if you're at the altar, the basket's being passed and you're trying to give an offering, and then you remember somebody has something against you, leave your offering there and go and be reconciled. And you're like, I've tried. You can do what you can do. But have you done that? For some of you, it's pretty easy. Some of you had a fight on the way to church with your spouse. And you're like, well, who's gonna humble themselves? Who's gonna apologize first? I would just say the most mature of you will be the one that apologizes first. All right, who's ever the most mature believer, whoever loves Jesus the most, they will put out Philippians chapter 2 and apologize on the way home. So let's go to the next one. All right, so you gotta resolve the conflict. Verse 6 and 7, most downloaded verses. So let's spend a little bit of time here. You gotta release the burdens that are weighing you down. Now this has been revolutionary for me, and I'll share one personal illustration. But look at verse 6 and 7. Do not be anxious about anything. Do not be anxious. It means your mind is like going in 100 different directions. Do not. It's in what they call the present tense, which means he's basically saying, stop doing that. You're already doing it. Stop being anxious. It's the guy in jail. It's the guy in prison. Do not be anxious for anything, but here's how you don't be anxious for anything. But in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known. In other words, you tell it to God. In verse 7, here's the promise. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding. In other words, you might not even understand it. Your neighbors definitely won't understand it, but it will guard your heart and your mind. And the heart and the mind are pretty close. They're not the same, but they're pretty close. They definitely go together. It said it will guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. Somebody told me this about 8 years ago, and I never thought about it this way. And it sounds like bad news, but it's great news, actually. Especially if you're like a control freak, or an 8 on the Enneagram, or whatever the Myers-Briggs is, or if you're preaching at 1122 right now, any of these things, then this is what you cannot, listen to me, you cannot control your future. You just let that It's not bad news. You can't control it. Now, you can control it maybe partially, but bottom line is there's so much, you cannot control your future. You can't control your health future. I mean, you could get cancer. You might have a heart attack. I mean, I got the phone call like 7 or 8 years ago. The lab was like, you got 2 out of the 12 samples are cancerous. It's like, what? That happens to other people. That doesn't happen to me. You could be in a car accident on I-95. Now, I say that only to say, if you were so weighed down by that, trying to control everything, you won't do the stuff you actually can do. Like eat right and go to the doctor and lose weight or whatever that is. You can't control, you can't control your family future. You can't. Your kids might rebel for a time. They might. Your spouse might go off the deep end and leave. But you do what you can. But if all you're thinking of is, I got to control that, you won't do the stuff you can do, like disciple your kids or pray for your kids and pray with your spouse and go on dates and all that. And here's one, you can't control your financial future. Man, we have like forgotten 2008. We've forgotten it. I mean, you can't. You can do this stuff. You can retire. You can spend less than you bring in. You can do all those things, but you can't control it, all right? Stock market might crash tomorrow, and you might not be able to retire. If anything, I mean, I know y'all didn't have COVID, but about 2 months. We had it like 2 years up in North Carolina, just so you know. And that was the hardest learning curve, so I'll give you one more beside. This is like, confessional time. So COVID was probably, I can't remember where we were about. It was probably in that 8 or 10 month area. I think we had started back with maybe RSVPs. I can't remember where we were, but I was so frustrated about everything. I mean, if I was like, I still got PTSD if I see a mask. If you have a mask on, I love you. All right, I'm just saying. It's like, and so I live kind of out in the country, and some degree, my therapy sometime is to go. I have a place where I can, anyway, I've got like a field, and I've got a German Shepherd, and the German Shepherd needs a lot of exercise, so I'll get to the top of the hill, and there's a field behind me I don't own, but I get to enjoy, and I'll hit sand wedges to the fence and back. And that German Shepherd, his name is Ranger, he'll go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So it's good therapy for me, it's good therapy for him, and he gets worn out. And during COVID, I was just getting more and more angry. I mean, I wasn't hitting it very good either, but that was part of it. But mostly it was just building up. And I would say, to my shame, there's a tree about right there. I was just like, I won't tell you what I said. It was just, whatever. Y'all know, scubilon, probably what I said. It's all right. So I take that wedge and I throw it in the tree. And I threw it in there to try to break it. And it, I almost said, okay. It ticked me off that it didn't even break. So I actually go over there, pick that wedge up, and pound the tree with it until the whole thing snaps. And then I walk in. The dog was shocked, but I walked in and I showed it to my wife, Lori, and she's like, did you break that? I was like, yeah. And it was, and actually, I told my church like the next week, because I'm like, well, no sense wasting that. That's a great sermon illustration. So I told them, I got more letters from that, because like, that's how I feel right now. Just all the anxiety had been pushed down. And that was like a turning point for me, because it was like embarrassing. It was embarrassing. It's like, I can't even control my stuff, and I'm asking my people to. And then God put verses like this on my heart. He says, how do you do that? He said, let your request be made known to God. And understand, this is also in what they call the present tense, which means it's not a one-time deal. Some of you have stopped praying for stuff that God has not told you to stop praying for. There's some stuff that God has told you to pray for in the past, but because you haven't seen anything that you can recognize, you've stopped praying for that. And what he's saying is, you got to go back to praying. You got to go back to praying. You got to go back to hoping that, listen, God is not done with that. Unless he's told you stop praying for that, keep praying for that. He said, let your requests be made known to God. And loved ones, here's what I'd say. So much of your Christian life is all about the question, am I gonna trust God with this or not? So much of your Christian life comes down to, am I going to trust God with this? Will I trust God? Do I believe He has my best interest at heart? And trust is an act of my will to give my burdens to God. And I'm gonna walk forward moment by moment, having rolled my burdens, or as Peter would say, casting all your anxiety upon Him, because why? He cares for you. And you anchor your heart in the reality that God loves me and God rescued me and God is sovereign. And by the way, you need to understand the sovereignty of God is the CPR of the Christian life. I know sovereignty of God gets kind of a bad rap sometime, but I would simply say this: the fact that God is in control is the CPR of your Christian life. When your heart is about to beat out of your chest and you are about to lose it and you don't know where to go, to understand that God is on His throne. He is not up there pacing back and forth. He's not wringing His hands. He's not looking down. He's like, what am I gonna do down there in Jacksonville, Florida? He's none of that. He is ruling the universe with His feet up, and He is sovereign over all things. And when you get that on your mind, it's like, I don't know what He's gonna do, but I mean, as you all know, if the tomb is empty, there is a plan, all right? If the tomb is empty, none of this stuff is out of His control, and the tomb is empty. And so what we're gonna do is understand God is sovereign over this. I might not see it, I might not understand it, but I know He loves me and He cares for me. Here's a verse that says, what shall we say then? Romans 8, what shall we say then to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare His own Son, but gave Him up for us all, how will He not also with Him graciously give us all things? What he's arguing from the greater to the lesser. He's like, look, do you not understand? I gave you my Son. He bled and died for your sin. He took your sin, gave you His righteousness. If I would reconcile you and adopt you and redeem you and forgive you, do you not think I'm gonna take care of the other stuff? I mean, think about it this way. If you and I go to lunch and we're walking to the restaurant and you look at me and go, oh, dog, man, I forgot my wallet. I don't have any money. If I say, don't worry about it, what am I saying? I'm saying I'm gonna take care of it. That would be a bad joke if I said, don't worry about it, and then the check comes and you're like, I don't have any money. You're like, well, too bad, too sad. Have fun washing dishes because, I'm out. That'd be like a bad joke. And I'm saying God is not doing that. God is saying, I got this. I want you to bring it to me in dependence on me. I love the verse that says, call upon me in the day of trouble, and I will deliver you, and you will glorify me. That's a phenomenal verse, Psalm 50:15. Call to me in your day of trouble. That's where some of you are right now. It's the day of trouble, maritally, financially, relationally, whatever. You're in that day of trouble. He says, call to me. It's the Old Testament version of what Paul's saying. Call to me in your day of trouble. I will deliver you, and when I deliver you, you're gonna bring me glory. Now, it's hard to tell, is he gonna get glory when he delivers you, or is he gonna get most glory as he's bringing you through that before the deliverance? It's kind of hard to tell the way it's phrased. I would say this though, we have the misunderstanding that we think the world out there is super impressed when we get blessed. It's like, oh man, I tell you what, if they see me walking around with my swag and in my Cadillac and all this blessing, they're gonna go, man, that's amazing. And sometimes that happens. But you know what is so much more impressive to the lost world is when they watch you go through hell and you still trust God. When they see the single mom, that's like, you know what? Husband walks out and she still loves Jesus and she still loves God and she's teaching her little 5-year-old, you can love Jesus too and He will come through for us. That is like 100 times more impressive than cotton candy and Cadillacs, as a pastor would say. So here's where we are. Luther said it this, he just said, pray and let God do the worrying. Pray and let God do the worrying. And so Psalm 34, which was mentioned earlier, I'm trying to memorize the first 10 verses. I got about halfway done right now. But it simply says this, it says, I will bless the Lord at all times, at all times. His praise will continually be in my mouth. My soul will make its boast in the Lord. And he says, let the humble hear it and be glad. Somehow people are watching that. They're like, let the humble hear your praise of God, and that brings rejoicing with them. And then it says, oh, magnify the Lord with me, let us exalt his name together. And then here's verse 4. Verse 4 says, I sought the Lord, and he answered me, and he delivered me from all of my fears. In other words, part of the mechanism for God delivering you from, again, fear and anxiety and worry, they're siblings. Part of the way, loved one, that he is gonna deliver you from those fears. It might not change the circumstances, but he will build faith in you through you going to God and giving him that request. And like, God, here it is, I do not have what it takes. Because he says the peace of God. And the peace of God for a Jewish rabbi, for a guy like the Apostle Paul, he would go back to the Hebrew term shalom, which doesn't just mean a lack of conflict. It means a wholeness. It means a sense of calm and tranquility and my soul being right with the Lord, which goes back to like the Romans 5 passage that says what? You know what? We have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. You can't have the peace of God until you have peace with God. You understand that? I mean, so if you're sitting there like, my life is just like hell in a handbasket, I don't know what's going on, you gotta ask the question, first of all, have I ever embraced Jesus by faith? Have I ever embraced him by faith and said, you know what, you please be my Savior. Save me, make me the person you want me to be. Has that ever happened? Because if you don't have that, you're not gonna have the peace of God. But let me finish with this. Look at verse 8 and 9. Verse 8 and 9 is about rewiring what's up here. I got saved at 17, so there was a long time of patterns of thinking that had gotten pretty entrenched. So if you came to Christ late, you gotta understand there's some parts that you gotta kind of make up for lost time a little bit. So here, let me just read the verses. Verse 8 says, finally, brothers, whatever is true, we'll focus on that one, is true as opposed to lies. Whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think, dwell on, focus on these things. Focus on these things. If you've ever had to learn like how to ride a motorcycle, one of the things they tell you is you're gonna go wherever you look. All right, if you go up to North Carolina and you see all those winding roads, there are people every single summer, and they'll just like fly off the Blue Ridge Parkway. They'll fly off the Tail of the Dragon. And part of it is they're just like looking around trying to drive like that, and and all of a sudden they're going where they're looking. And they teach you, you're gonna go where you look. You're gonna go where you look. You're gonna go where you look. Loved one, the same thing is true. If you're looking at the scriptures and if you're looking at truth enough time, that's where you're naturally gonna go to. And if you're looking at all the junk and stuff that is dishonorable and untrue, you're gonna go there as well. And so, what you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace, again, that's the whole point of the message, the God of peace will be with you. And I know your pastor's told you this before. When you do come to Christ, there's a whole bunch of new stuff. I don't know about, I love new stuff. I hope you do. I mean, I love, if I go to the car wash, it's like, give me that new car smell, whatever it is, new is awesome. And you get a bunch of new stuff when you come to Christ. It's pretty cool. You get a new heart, you get a new song put in your mouth. Lamentation says you get new mercies every morning. You get a new name. I don't really know exactly how that's gonna work. I'm kind of looking forward to that. Has there ever been a more lame name than Bruce? So I'm just like, I'm gonna get a cool name like Joby in heaven. So I'm just saying that. But here's the struggle. The struggle is you didn't get a new mind. All right, you got a new heart. You got all this new stuff. You did not get a new mind. That's why Romans talks about, listen, the way God sanctifies you and grows you, the primary battle is gonna be right up here. And so when you talk about, well, I made things right with I resolved the conflict, and I'm gonna pray about, but you gotta offload the burden, but then fill it back with part of God's word. All right, I'm not just gonna have a vacuum, I'm gonna unload my burdens onto God and pick up a promise that is true. So let me give you this here. The Romans passage says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. The renewing of your mind. So that's how it works. Think about it this way. We moved, I told you about the house, we're kind of out in the country, but we only moved there like 5 years ago. And so before that, I would come out of the church, out of my office, go down to the stoplight, and I would take a left to go to our house. And we lived there for 9, 10 years. And so for 9 or 10 years, 5 or 6 days a week, I would go to the light, take a left, go to the light, take a left, go to the light, take a left, go to the light, take a left. And then when we moved, it's embarrassing how many times, whether it be on the phone or distracted or whatever, I would go to the light because my new house was to the right. But I would go to the light and being distracted, not thinking, because it had been so entrenched of a pattern, I would take a left and go like a half mile. I go, dummy, and turn around. And what it took is over and over and over again, I had to tell myself, listen, I'd go up to the light and I'm like, all right, I don't live there anymore. I live over here. That's not my address anymore. That's where I used to live, but I don't live there anymore. I live over here. And as a Christian, you got to do the same thing. When Jesus saves you, he gets your citizenship, puts it into heaven. But what you've got to do is say, I don't live over there anymore. I don't live where I used to live. I live in a new place. I'm a citizen of heaven. I'm a follower of Jesus. And so I'm not turning left anymore. I'm going to turn right. And a lot of stuff Jesus does is it's just like that. I mean, a lot of it's just a pronouncement. You get justified, adopted, forgiven, all of that, boom. But sanctification, it is a process, not a pronouncement. And so here's what we're gonna do. If you have something today that is, you know it, my guess is there's already been 1 or 2 or 3 things that you know, I got to give this over to God. This is killing me. This is what keeps me up at night. This is what makes me irritable. This is what, and it's indicative of I haven't trusted the Lord with this. Or maybe you did trust him with that situation, but you've got it back. You brought it back. And so the idea is, what is it that you need to lay over, cast onto the Lord today? But then I got to fill it back up. And so we have 2 boys. And without going into too much detail, I got 2 boys, and one of them he's actually one of our campus pastors. So I got one boy who's a preacher, and I have one boy who's a prodigal. Love them the same, obviously. They grew up in the same household, and did the same things. And one walks with Jesus, and one at this time is not walking with Jesus. And there's nothing like that, just so you know. I mean, any parent in here, kid pain is difficult. And so obviously when you're going through this, and this has been a deal we've been going through 4 or 5 years now, and so if you don't grab a hold, first of all, it's not like you give it to the Lord and then just, it's over. It is a continual it is a continual giving. I remember we were singing, I can't remember, it was a song that talks about the heavens are roaring, the praise of your glory. And I can't remember. And I remember about 4 years ago, when my son was a young adult pastor, we were baptizing a bunch of young adults. And I remember, I hadn't cried very much in a long time, but part of it's stubbornness and German and all that kind of stuff. But I saw my son, my young adult son, he led a bunch of these guys to Christ, and he's over there baptizing, and we're singing this song. And it was like a mixture of like tears of joy, because it's like, so he just led people to Christ and he's baptizing them, and yet the heaviness of knowing that one of them was not walking with the Lord. If you don't continually give that over to the Lord, it will beat you down. And the whispers will just it'll almost take you out if you're not careful. But it's not just, you got to give it to the Lord, and then you got to pick up a promise. And so the promise God gave us is Psalm 27:13. It says this, it says, I would have despaired if I did not believe that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. It says, I would have despaired. In other words, I would have despaired. I would have been totally a wreck if I did not believe, and there's a faith element to it, if I did not believe that I would see the goodness of the Lord. In other words, there's going to be a day where I don't understand it, but the goodness of God, we will be able to step back and say, God's goodness is all over that. Now, whether I get to see it by driving in the driveway or whether I get to see it by the phone call, I don't know. But what I'm saying is I would have despaired if I did not believe that I will see the goodness of the Lord, not just in heaven, but he says in the land of the living. That means the here and the now. That means before I die, there's going to be a day where I get to see the goodness of the Lord in a very difficult situation. So what you have to do, what you got to do, loved ones, and pray for him, by the way. Pray for him. All right, don't share this video with him, just, just like us. But you do pray for him. Here's what I would say this. What is it that you need to come and pray? You're like this, you need to be able to say, this burden is too much. I'm tired of carrying this. It might be your marriage. It might be your marriage. You know that. I mean, your marriage might be in trouble. You might have stopped praying for your marriage to be what it should be. And one of the first things you need to do is go back to praying. All right, stop coping and what are we gonna do? Let's just make it till the kids go to college and go back to hoping. You know what? There's a better day ahead that God can heal our marriage. You come up and pray. Some of you do have a prodigal, or you got a prodigal grandson or granddaughter, or maybe you've got a teenager and you're like super worried about where she's going and the friends she's hanging around. Well, keep praying. You come up and you lift her name up to the Lord. It's like, God, I can't carry this anxiety. I can't sleep at night because of the people she's hanging around. You come up and pray and you go, God, would you help that sin just turn to gravel in her mouth so that's not even attractive anymore? And you just begin to pray that way. Maybe you got a financial element. Maybe you got something going on. You come and pray and say, God, I can't handle this anymore. You can handle it. I am taking you at your word. I'm taking it. I'm casting the burdens back onto you. And if you're not praying, man, you better be singing about the goodness of God. Praise does something to your faith that almost nothing else can do, especially collectively. You come, let us magnify the Lord together. So I'm gonna pray, and then we're gonna sing, and we're gonna come pray. So Father, that's our prayer. There's a lot of scar tissue in the room. There's a lot of stuff that kind of, you pick it and it hurts, and we don't really wanna go there sometime. But God, you're a gracious God. You're a good God. And just like that Romans 8 passage said, I mean, if you did not, when you gave us your son, so will you not graciously give us all the stuff that we need? And so my prayer tonight is that there be a lot of transferring of burdens, and that your promise that says that we lift these things up to you in prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, that the peace of God would guard our hearts and minds. And my prayer is that men and women all across the Jacksonville area would be able to walk out of church having given you that burden that has been beating them up, and be able to walk out with a peaceful mind, with shalom. We love you. We trust you. Pray these next few minutes you would be glorified by the way we respond to the word. And we pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.